Hello and welcome into FTV Game Night. I'm Pearson Fowler, joined alongside by Stephen Dixon, talking about LeBron James hanging 61 on the Bobcats last night, and a little bit later, Christian MacMullan's going to join us to talk some March Madness. But first, NFL news. It's been too long, hadn't it, Stephen?
Oh, it's been, what, 2 months? Not even 2 months,
Not even
a
2
month.
months. It's been a month.
A month.
And it's been too long. I miss it already.
Yeah, we're getting into free agency, a little bit of the draft, but
Yeah.
we still got a while for that to happen.
Some drama with the franchise tagging going on, but the biggest story, one of the two biggest stories coming out of the NFL lately, is the NFL's beginning discussions about whether or not they should ban the N-word. It would be a 15-yard penalty, making it, I believe, the 20th 15-yard penalty that they have in the rule book. And Richard Sherman came out recently and said that the decision to do that would be atrocious and considered that in itself to be racist. Stephen, what do you think about this?
Well, I think it's in Richard Sherman's best interest to use any sort of profanity because, let's face it, one big part of his game is to get into other receivers' heads. So, I mean, he probably uses the N-word while he's on the field. As a Caucasian male, I don't use the N-word. I've never felt the need to use the N-word. So it doesn't really concern me because I don't play in the NFL as well. But I could see why the NFL wants to, get rid of that word just because of the history of it. And they want to clean up their league because they want the image of being a family-friendly environment. And getting rid of that sort of profanity would help with that. Do I agree with the NFL in trying to get rid of this? I don't really think so. I think being on the field, in the locker room, on the practice field, wherever it is, on the sideline, I think that's a special place that should only be accessible to players. I don't think that media should have access to it. I don't think fans should have the access to it. So, frankly, it shouldn't matter what kind of language these guys use on the field. It's football.
You make a lot of good points about it being a private space, particularly the locker room and the sideline. I am inclined to disagree with you regarding the field because that's the performance space if you want to think about it.
Oh, they can watch what's on the field. It's just why do they have to hear the audio?
Right.
From the field?
Well, and here's the other thing. I think that's just a really difficult thing to regulate. I mean, that's going to get from what I hear from what players say, from what former players say, that gets tossed around a lot in the locker room, on the sideline, in text messages, as we've seen. You and I have both read the correspondence between Incognito and Martin, exactly. So that gets tossed around a lot. I think regulating it on the field, what they're trying to do, as you mentioned, just sort of control that image, and that's what people see. Everyone isn't privy to, access to the locker room, to the sideline, to these guys' personal lives. So I can appreciate what they're doing, but I think it's just too difficult to regulate. And one of the other points that Richard Sherman makes that I want to touch on is that he said, if you're going to try and ban the N-word, you might as well just try and ban all profanity, F-bombs and things like that, because, just banning the N-word, while it does have a little bit more of a historical context than just something like an F-bomb, it is
they're not going to be able to get rid of that on an NFL field.
No, they're not.
Where there's 300-pound men hitting each other on every play.
Right.
You're just not going to get rid of that. It's impractical to think. I think this is a case where you have guys in suits that have never played professional football, that are like the rest of us in terms of our athletic ability, deciding what you can and can't do on the NFL field. I think they need to consult with people that have played the game. I don't know how many, African-American players are represented in terms of this being a rule, or in terms of them talking about this becoming a rule. It sounds like Roger Goodell and the league office are driving this initiative, but Richard Sherman, I think, is representing the players' best interests, or maybe not best interests, but their interests. They want to play, they want a comfort zone that they've come to know on the field. They want to keep that comfort zone. I think Roger Goodell and the league office, they're looking at it as a move for the league's best interest. So you have two conflicting agendas here. And really, there's not one right answer or the other. Everything's debatable. It really just depends on, where you're from, how you were raised, and, what your job is. Are you a league office suit, or are you an NFL player? Are you an NFL coach, a referee? It really just depends on the perspective that you're coming from and, what you believe.
Yeah, well, and adding on to that, the NFL is a business fundamentally, and the front office is just concerned with their image. While the players they're concerned about going out there and playing. They're concerned, if you're Richard Sherman, you gotta have your ammunition trash talking. And like you said, there are things that you're used to, that you've grown up with, and this honestly doesn't concern, you or myself being, white males. That
have
word
never played or will ever play that level of football.
Well, and then that's just never a word that will be in our vernacular. But there are other people, there are other cultural circumstances where people have grown up hearing that, saying that, in the African American community, and it just seems weird to try and take that away. And again, just really, I feel like almost impossible to regulate is what it comes down to for me.
I think if my one question for Richard Sherman, and I will never use the N-word. I feel no need to use it as a white Caucasian male. But what happens when a guy, let's say Richie Incognito, says it on the field? You can't be upset when he says it because all NFL players are equal, right? So when a guy uses it on the field that is, white, Hispanic, Asian, not black, when they use it, I don't think Richard Sherman has, or somebody that's, advocating against this, that's defending using that type of profanity on the field, I don't think you can be upset because that's part of the game, right?
Yeah, you make a very interesting point.
I'm just trying to view it from both arguments.
No, yeah, absolutely.
I think the league office just wants it gone completely.
I think that's an interesting point. Yeah, that's going to have to be addressed probably sooner rather than later if this legislation goes through.
Oh, and there's been white players that have used it on the field, and they drew personal fouls from players because, let's face it, a lot of black players have gotten really upset at guys using that word on the field. And you know what? The team on the white player side, they probably gained 15 yards because their player used the N-word. And that's where it becomes a messy situation because I wouldn't treat the N-word like all other profanity because I think it really alienates a lot of people in the league, the majority of the league right now.
And it has that historical context again.
Yes. I don't think the F word, yes, it's vulgar, but I don't think it offends like the N-word does.
Yeah, definitely not on the same scale.
Yes.
Other big news coming out of the NFL this week, we've heard a lot about the controversy of Jim Harbaugh, the front office, the players, people getting fed up with him, almost was traded to the Browns. Steven, Jim Harbaugh is the fastest player in NFL history to get to 36 wins. The earliest he's ever bowed out of the playoffs is in the NFC Championship. And yet the front office, the players, the people around the San Francisco franchise seem to be very discontent. What's going on in San Francisco?
Well, we see it on the field, or at least on television, every single week. Does Jim Harbaugh seem like a guy that you could hang around for 3 years and he wouldn't grow, tiresome? He's a strong personality that, I think is going to bring an instant impact to a locker room, but it comes with a cost. The guy's an exhausting personality, and you're seeing that. I think guys in the locker room are fed up with Harbaugh's antics. Take it back to his first year in the league where him and Jim Schwartz had that scuffle going into the tunnel at Ford Field. I know Jim Schwartz was the one that ran after Harbaugh, but Harbaugh seems to rub a lot of people, not just in the 49ers organization, but around the league the wrong way. Because, frankly, that was the first time we saw Jim Schwartz do anything like that in the NFL. That was not the first time we've seen Harbaugh, and that's not the last time we've seen Harbaugh do anything like that. He's an exhausting guy to be around. He's so competitive, I think it contradicts, his job sometime and his relationship with, the front office, Trent Baalke, and the owner, Jed York. There's just been, I think there's a lot of tension in that front office, in that locker room. And especially with, wanting to pay a guy like Colin Kaepernick $18 million, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And, Harbaugh wants a new contract. There's just a lot of egos, a lot of strong, brash personalities colliding at the same time, and it's creating kind of a messy storm.
And such is the nature of a game that's, comprised primarily of all these alpha male types. But real quickly, we're up against a break here. What's the future for Jim Harbaugh? How long is he going to be in San Francisco, and what's his next destination?
Oh, he's going to stay until he stops winning, which, frankly, we haven't seen Jim Harbaugh go anywhere and not win. The guy won at Stanford. The guy won at San Francisco. I think it's going to take a off season where a lot of guys not tend to get hurt, but just get hurt, that's where you'll see Jim Harbaugh and the 49ers kind of have their divorce because I think they want it, but they're not going to give up a 12-4 season and a legitimate shot at the Super Bowl. You and I both thought they were the second best team in the NFL, and still thought they were better than the Seattle Seahawks last season. They just had to play at CenturyLink Field in the NFC Championship game.
At very least one of the most talented rosters.
Yeah.
But you see this blowing over. You don't think the players will get fed up with them and you know, sort of a lot of times, you know, what you'll see with situations like this is the players won't want to play for the coach anymore.
Yeah.
And obviously that ends up being a big conflict. You know, you start losing football games because you don't have that unity.
I just don't think the roster – I think the roster turnover is going to come so quickly because guys are going to want new deals. A lot of these players will leave the locker room. And the key for Jim Harbaugh is to just make sure Patrick Willis, Colin Kaepernick, Michael Crabtree, Vernon Davis, and maybe Aldon Smith are happy. And, I mean, if those guys are happy, your locker room's happy. And as long as your locker room's happy, that team's talented enough to win 12, 11 games a season. And
Hello and welcome back into FTV Game Night. Stephen, last night LeBron James goes into Charlotte Bobcat Stadium and decides that he's going to have himself a career night despite not having his peripheral vision as he's still wearing that clear mask. Has a career high and Miami Heat franchise record 61 points on 8 of 10 from three-point shooting. What is there to say? I mean, in a year when this guy continues to just get better and better, his field goal percentage has gotten better every year for the last 8 years. He continues to amaze. A guy that's not really a scorer in the same way that we think of Kevin Durant or maybe Kobe Bryant or someone like that, goes out there and has an amazing performance like this. What can you say about LeBron James?
Best player in basketball, it's pretty simple. I mean, one thing I did notice about last night, he did do it against the Charlotte Bobcats, correct?
That's true. That's true.
Okay, it seems like every great player has their greatest game against the Charlotte Bobcats, no matter what year it is. And
But
that's just,
Charlotte's in the
I
playoff
know.
race of the Eastern Conference, which has nothing to do with Charlotte and has everything to do with the Eastern Conference.
okay, yesterday morning, you know how Russell Westbrook had a huge game on Sunday?
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there watching SportsCenter, and they start talking about, you know, Russell Westbrook had his biggest game back in like 2011 against the Charlotte Bobcats. And I go, LeBron James is going to play the Bobcats coming up, you know, later tonight. And the guy scored 61 points.
61 points.
I mean, the Charlotte Bobcats, man, they give up the biggest games, but you have to give a little bit of credit to LeBron. He's the best player in basketball because he can play all over the floor, but last night they needed him as a scorer. What did he do? Scored points. It's not like a Kobe Bryant or a Tracy McGrady 61 points. It's a LeBron James 61 points that I think makes it even more impressive because I know for a fact he shot high from the field. I don't have to look at the box score.
22 of 33 from the field.
I mean, the guy shot 66% from the field. That's amazing.
That's disgusting.
When Tracy McGrady was scoring 60 points in a couple games of his career, you know, the guy was 25 of 50. So it's a big difference. LeBron was still distributing the ball all over the floor. Maybe not racking up every assist, but he's still, you know, running the offense. He just happened to hit every shot he made.
Yeah.
So
it was an amazing groove that he got into, and you mentioned he wasn't just scoring. He still had 7 assists and 5 rebounds in the game. And again, you mentioned he's the best player in the game because he does everything, because he rebounds, because he's probably the best passer in the league except for maybe Rondo and maybe Chris Paul. But other than that, I don't think anyone
those
can
guys
pass
are
as well
assist
as LeBron.
specialists. They're point
Exactly.
guards.
And he plays excellent defense. He's a good leader. And he hasn't, you know, historically been the scorer, as I mentioned, that Kobe Bryant or Durant or, like you said, Tracy McGrady, anyone like that has been. And yet he still managed to score 61. His previous career high was 56, which is nothing to sneeze at. And I don't know if he'll ever have an 88-point game like Kobe Bryant had, but the fact that he has the potential to do this just has to be terrifying for opponents. I mean, obviously he has the ability because he's the best player in the league, but to actually see him put up those numbers is just startling.
Yeah, the guy is just an insane basketball player, but we've known this for how many years now? I don't think it's... I mean, 61 points is impressive no matter who you are. If you're Michael Jordan or LeBron James, you know, or Kobe Bryant, I'm not shocked when you score 61. It's just a matter of when, not if. But, you know, moving on, I think the biggest topic, you know, from this past weekend wasn't about a team that is going to make the playoffs this season. It's one of the worst teams in basketball. The New York Knicks, they are absolutely horrible. They are an atrocious team, an embarrassment, as Stephen A. Smith would call it. My big thing is Carmelo Anthony, he can opt out of his contract at the end of the season. He has 2 years left on his current deal. But the way the NBA works, a player can opt out or a team can opt for a contract just depending on that contract. Do you think Carmelo leaves?
I think he leaves. I think he's seen other guys that were in his draft class, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James. Obviously, LeBron in a different class than Carmelo, who is basically just a scorer and an inconsistent scorer, I would say at that. But he's seeing these guys around him getting rings. He's not getting any younger. He's approaching the end of his prime. I think you're going to see Carmelo leave in search of a ring. He's not going to be content, staying on a Knicks team that is just a dumpster fire like they are. And I don't think it's about the money for him anymore. I think it's about pride. I think it's about, I want to win, I want a ring, I want to be able to put my name somewhere in NBA history other than that guy with a lot of potential that used to shoot a lot of threes. Because that's what he is right now. And make a lot of money, which he will do if he stays in New York.
He'll make a lot of money no matter what. By endorsement deals.
Right.
He made so much in New York. Hopefully he didn't blow it all like a lot of other NBA stars tend to do.
But he can stay in New York and make that guaranteed money, or he can go somewhere. And then I don't think any team is going to be willing to shell out for him like they would for a LeBron, again, because he's getting older, because he's a ball stopper, because basically wherever he goes, he stops the balls and he eats up shots like Kobe Bryant. But he's not as good a scorer as Kobe Bryant. He's not as clutch as Kobe. So he's got, I don't want to say limited usefulness because he's still a good player, but he's not an all-star. He's not going to be the guy that wins you a championship, and so teams aren't going to be shelling out money for him. So if it's about a money thing, he's going to stay in New York. If it's about winning, he's going to have to leave.
I think a perfect fit for him. I don't think he could go to a Los Angeles or Lakers or Clippers and succeed there. I think the Lakers are the same thing as the Knicks. They're just in the Western Conference, and then the Clippers. They don't. I think Carmelo needs to go to a place that plays good defense and that has enough room, but enough pieces as well. A team like the Chicago Bulls really seems to fit, in my opinion, because let's face it, you have Tom Thibodeau. I think his defensive personality is even bigger than Carmelo's offensive-only personality. Carmelo has a history of not wanting to always play defense. You have to do that in Tibbs' offense. I think he would maximize Melo's potential. Melo can play in any offense. The guy's proven to score in any type of situation, and that's kind of what the Bulls need. So there would be your perfect fit. And they have questions about Derrick Rose, and he's really been their only consistent scorer in the past 5 years in Chicago. I think Carmelo Anthony could solve a lot of problems and maybe, push around Indy and Miami. I don't think they'd beat either one of them in the next few years, but at least they would contend, I think.
All right, well, let me ask you this. If Carmelo really is set on winning and he's not about the money and he's going to do whatever it takes to get a ring, let's operate under that assumption here. Is he willing to go somewhere and not be the guy? Is he willing to be a piece in the same way that Ray Allen is a piece right now in Miami?
I mean, he'd still be the star in Chicago, I think, and
even if Derrick Rose comes back.
I don't think you can put Carmelo up there with a LeBron James.
No, you can't. But is he willing to accept that deferential role though, or is he going to have to go somewhere?
If he wants to win a championship, yes.
Okay.
But
I don't know if he can do that.
He hasn't proven that he's willing to just not be that guy.
Yeah, exactly. Which is my only concern with him. He's gonna. I feel like
that's one reason I thought Chicago was a good fit for him, because he would still be the guy that would score all the points. Because let's face it, Derrick Rose will probably have another knee injury next season, so we can't count on him.
Awful.
We can't count on him to do anything.
The Bulls have
gotten
rid of
He's
Luol
out
Deng.
for the season. What is that?
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think that could be a good fit. Again, losing some shooters, losing Luol Deng. I mean, they've resorted to picking up Jimmer Fredette to try and score some points for him. I could see Carmelo fitting in if he's willing to play in Tibbs' system, which he should be, because Tibbs in the top 3 best coaches in the league right now, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, especially his defensive philosophy. It sometimes is overbearing to its players, but I think if you have a strong scorer like Carmelo Anthony, I mean, let's face it, when Derrick Rose was healthy and scoring all the points for the Bulls, they were winning 60 games a season. Mm-hmm. Yes, they lost to the Heat, but most teams do. So it's not there's no shame in losing to the Heat sometimes, and you can't expect the Heat to always stay that good. I think the Bulls will just get better because they would need that consistent scorer, but I think Thibodeau's defensive philosophy is strong enough to where that'd be a good fit. And hopefully Derrick Rose does stay healthy in the next few seasons, because let's face it, he's been a great offensive scorer, but I would love to see his game develop into more of a passer and a scorer, be a dual threat type of guy. So that's my opinion on Carmelo and where he should go.
All right, well, that's all we have time for. Stick around, though. Don't go anywhere. Christian MacMullan is going to join us on the other side and talk some early March Madness.
Hello and welcome back to FTV Gamenight. I'm Stephen Dixon. Pearson Fowler just left the show, but Christian MacMullan will join in for the third segment to talk college basketball. Christian, March Madness is coming up. There's a lot of good teams. I mean, it's the biggest tournament in sports with, what is it, not 64 teams, but 68. So there's a lot to talk about, almost too much at times. That's why they call it March Madness, though. A quick team I want to talk about that doesn't really get the media attention. I think it's because they're in Omaha, Nebraska, and they're a private school, they're a Catholic university, Creighton. Do you think they could go far into the NCAA tournament? Do you like their style of play?
Absolutely. Creighton obviously has one of the best players in basketball with Doug McDermott. He's proven it. Absolutely. They've had one of the best teams in the country, Villanova's number, this entire year. They're they were a competitor last year. A lot of guys have been there before. Great coaching. There's no way you can't love what they've done this year in the Big East and how they performed. So it's good to see them in a major conference. Glad we don't have to talk about them as one of those mid-majors that could sneak into the national scene. They belong. Yeah,
because they've been playing big conference type of basketball for the last few years at least.
It's big ball for sure.
I mean, and finally they get to justify by playing in a big conference, the Big East, with that tradition, unlike any other really in college basketball, with a lot of the Catholic universities and everything. Another team I want to go to that's not in the Big East, but this is a mid-major, the only team that's still undefeated in college basketball, Wichita State. Okay, they went to the Final Four last year, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
So can they do it again? I mean, they look even better this year.
Oh, they do. They obviously going undefeated 31-0 is an incredible feat. I don't really care about the fact that it's in the Missouri Valley Conference. That's a basketball conference. It's tough. Greg Marshall had coached his team to where they needed to be, and they've been absolutely electric thus far. A lot of returning stars. Clanthony Early has been amazing. Ron Baker. It's been great. Fred VanVleet's been top-notch, getting the ball around, spread around. So to go undefeated in that conference, and remember, I think they'd have had more quality wins if teams would have been a little bit more willing to face them. Not a lot of your big major teams want to start off against Wichita State because they know how dangerous they can be, and they know how dangerous they're going to become March, and provided they don't have a massive slip-up in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, this is going to be a team that could easily go to the Final Four any other year.
Okay, I'm going to switch over to the major conferences, at least what I call the football conferences. You know, you have the Big Ten where you have Ohio State, Michigan State that are always pretty consistent in making the tournament, making noise. Don't forget Wisconsin as well. And then, you know, the Southeastern Conference has Florida, who's been one of the best teams all season long. The ACC with Duke, Syracuse, Chapel Hills, and obviously University of Virginia. If I gave you two spots that major conferences got, and let's say Creighton and Wichita State, or somebody like Villanova that you're going to talk about in a second, they get the first two, who out of those teams that I just listed gets the other two Final Four spots?
Well, it's incredibly tough to say. I would love to say Villanova could be back there. Jay Wright has been there before. They had a Final Four run in 2009, very successful. Virginia looks right now like the team to be beaten, and they avoided those slip-ups in ACC play. Everybody had a fallout in the little games, those tough games, Tobacco Road, NC State, Maryland.
A lot of parity in college basketball.
Yeah, and they avoided a lot of that. I like Virginia a lot. They're doing just great things. They could be a team. I'm going to pencil them into the Final Four right now, just the way the landscape is, because of their ability to avoid the little mistakes, and I think that'll save them a lot in the ACC tournament. I want to say it's going to be a Big Ten team, but it's difficult to look at them and things the way they are now. It's a lot of parity. Teams like Michigan are very, very good and have proven it all season long, but the fundamental issue of inability to score around the basket and have to depend on shooting, as is the case with all the Big Ten teams.
Yeah, I was about to say that plagues the entire conference for some reason.
Yeah, it's going to be too difficult, I think, to see them. Florida right now looks like a Final Four competitor. another team that's got a coach who's been there before. They've done it.
I just think, in my case against Florida, is the fact that we've heard nothing about, at least, I mean, they've been a top 5 team, so we have heard something about them, but they're not playing that ACC, Big Ten, Big East schedule, it feels like. I mean, they're playing this Southeastern Conference, which isn't exactly the strongest basketball conference. You have Kentucky and Florida. And
yeah.
I don't see much outside of that. That's what always troubles me, and usually one of the few negatives when Florida and Kentucky are strong teams going into the tournament.
Absolutely, and especially, and if you look at what's happened out in the Pac-10, Arizona is back to being an elite team. It's very competitive. Not a lot to talk about the Big 12. Some good teams there. Kansas is always going to be competitive with Bill Self, and especially with the freshman talent that they have. So it's hard to say Florida, but the way things have turned out, they are the default number 1 because no one wants to put Wichita State there. But I think Wichita State's still the best team in the country.
Okay, so you get 4 number 1 seeds. Who are they and go?
Wichita State absolutely needs to be a number 1 lock. Florida will probably end up the number 1 overall seed, provided they don't slip up against Kentucky or South Carolina in their final 2 matchups. Third, I'm going to go with Virginia. If the ACC tournament works out in their favor, they've been fantastic if they avoid those little slip-ups. And last, Arizona has been incredibly competitive all year long. And
another team kind of like Florida that just doesn't seem to grab anyone's attention just because they've been so consistently good all season.
Yeah, and they've shown they're getting better, and it's going to be all up to what they do in the tournament, obviously, but they deserve to be there.
Okay, and one last question before we go. Who is the Naismith Award winner this year?
Without a doubt, Doug McDermott. He's been the best, most consistent player, consistent scorer. In college basketball, there's a lot of mid-majors that have guys who put up 28, 29, 30 a game.
Yeah.
And for a big conference player to be doing that with his size and to do it the way he does, absolutely no question. I thought it would have been Marcus Smart early in the season, but we've seen him kind of implode. And nobody else has kind of jumped and taken it away from him. We saw Xavier Thames at San Diego State play consistent basketball, but just not enough to get it done. If it's not McDermott, I don't know who else it would be.
Okay, and then trying to remember what else I would want to ask. Anything you want to add before we take a break?
It's a couple things. 2 teams to watch out for. SMU, under probably arguably the best coach maybe in all of basketball, Larry Brown, is a team sneaking back in the top 25 in the American Conference. They look good. They can beat anyone. They have a big matchup with Louisville tomorrow, which will really tell us a lot about their ability to succeed in the tournament. And a team you're never going to hear anything about, Stephen F. Austin, is your favorite to kind of sneak in. They've been strong all year long, and they could be one of the teams you're going to want to circling in your brackets come end of March.
Well, thanks, Christian. Always love you joining the show, talking college basketball. Hopefully we get you on before the national championship game or the Final Four, one of those 2 rounds at least in the NCAA tournament. Thanks for coming on. Absolutely. Thanks for watching the show, everyone. We'll see you back this time next week. Here's Taylor Collins with the Furman Sports Update.
Hi guys. Most of us have heard the recent buzz about whether college athletes should get paid or not. In the life of a typical college athlete, one going to weights, classes, practice, you don't have time for an extra part-time job to have money on the side. And that's the argument many athletes make, reasoning behind why they should get paid. Here with me today is Brant Masters, a senior on the Furman baseball team. Brant, can you take me through the typical day in the life of a collegiate baseball player?
Yeah, for guys coming back from injury like I am, we have to show up before class. So for me, that means 7 o'clock in the morning to rehab. Go that for about an hour 15 minutes, and go straight to class from about 8:30 to anywhere from 10:30 to 11:30. Be able to grab a quick bite to eat, then have to go back to more rehab or getting ready for practice at 3. You have to be there at 1:30. Then practice will start at 3, and that'll go from anywhere to 6 to 6:30. And then for us, we have weights at 6:30 at night, which will go for another hour and a half. So we're about done at about 8 o'clock.
Wow. So practice from 1:30 to 6:30, and then weights for a typical hour and a half after practice. So even in your off season, which is in the fall, do y'all have any practices or weights that you're required to go to in your so-called off season?
Yeah, we really don't have much of an off season because we play about a month of scrimmaging ourselves, practicing every day. then the season that is considered our off season, we still have weights 3 times a week, conditioning 3 times a week, and then, like I said, for injured guys, have rehab 5 times a day or 5 times a week.
Okay, so even in your so-called off season, there's no way you could maintain an average, even part-time job.
No, not really.
No. Okay. Well, the NCAA argues that athletes should not get paid because their payment is their free education. Some athletes get full scholarships, which include free books, meals, tuition, and that is sort of their reimbursement for being at college is a free education. However, Brant, how many days on average during and off season do you miss of your free education?
We just started season about 3 weeks ago, and we've already missed 4 days. So out of our 56-game schedule until May, we'll probably miss about 10 to 12 days.
Okay. So the argument against the NCAA's free education policy is, missing on average 10 to 12 games, as well as at bigger schools, maybe not here at Furman. The NCAA schedules bowl games and playoff games during the week, so athletes are required, pretty much if they want to play, to miss these classes. So, Brant, in your opinion, what do you think the NCAA should do regarding should athletes be getting paid or not? Do y'all get priority over normal college students, or do athletes sort of get the short end of the stick regarding this issue?
I think in more of an academic school like this, we're equal or kind of get pushed to the side because we're seeing that we're just here for sports, not for academic reasons. I think the NCAA should take some priority that at least we get first choice with classes. We get extra time, for study hall in the library if we need it because we're out there later. Some type of extra food money or food services or something like that as well.
So athletes here at Furman do not get first choice of class times, class schedules?
No.
Do athletes here at Furman get any sort of privileges over regular students who have ample free time?
Not really that I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brant, for being here with me today, and please continue to stay tuned as we take you through weekly Furman sports updates.
Incredible.
Let's just start over. I can't get a bubble.
You can't?
It's not good for bubbles.